All right, so we're going to continue now, and instead of we'll get a little off the actual structures and talk about how the nervous system and even hormones now affect behavior, and we'll use some examples. So we're going to start with a FAP, a fixed action pattern. Again, you might recognize the guy on the right. That is Timbergen, and with his 4 questions, and so he came up with this idea about this fixed action pattern. And here we have a herring gull. And what he believed is there's some kind of releaser, some sensory input that was causing a behavior, a complex behavior or response. And so in the herring gull, if you look, most gulls have this little dot right here, this red dot. And so the idea behind it was that babies need to feed. And babies are instinctively will peck at spots. If you take a baby chicken, born first day, it'll go around and pick at spots on the ground. Mom kind of teaches them what food is and what rocks are, I guess. But anyway, so it's a very quick way of getting them to learn something. And so same thing. What happens is the baby gull breaks out, and it's kind of instinctively pecks at a spot. Well, you got this bright red spot on a bill. That's what it pecks at. That pecking then causes the gull to regurgitate its food and feed its baby, and that's that complex response. All right, and Timbergen, along with Lorenz, came up with an idea from Oscar Henroth, and about how another instinctive behavior, fixed action pattern, would cause a response. And what Oscar realized is chickens react instinctively to hawk silhouettes, and the short neck, long neck idea. So what happened was they did this silhouette experiment. You can see the silhouette here. And if you drag it in one direction, it looks like it has a long neck and a short tail, and that looks more like a goose or a duck. And it turned out ducks and chickens don't really react to that. But if you fly it the opposite direction with the short neck and the longer body, then they will instinctively kind of duck or try to hide in the idea of a predator like a hawk or a falcon. And so again, this simple stimuli leads to this more complex hiding behavior. Now, there has been lots of studies since then on this, and arguments whether it's the short neck that does it, is it the full body image like the pattern here, and some even like it to learning called habituation, which we'll talk about. So again, even what we consider simple behaviors have different levels of learning and complexity to it. And taking it a step further, so a FAP is a fixed action pattern, a MAP is a modal action pattern. And the idea is you have a fixed action pattern that can be modified. And in this case, Barlow did it on some birds, a warbler, and warblers are known for their songs, and that's how males attract females. What happens is instinctively, again, birds learn to sing their song when they're in the nest. Actually, in the egg, they're hearing their parents sing. That song is kind of ingrained in the brain, and they come out and sing, and to attract a female. Now, what they find is males with more experience have more kind of frills in the song. They have little nuances that a young bird won't get. And if you see in this group, the repertoire means that they have more nuances. And the one that have more nuances, the older birds tend to have more quicker pairing. You know, how long do you have to sing before you get a mate? And the youngsters, you know, they're singing for over 40 days, whereas the other males maybe as little as 20. So the idea that even these fixed action patterns can be switched, and that would be called a modal action pattern. All right, and then what I want to do, and I've got a couple of videos you can watch up on, but we have how moths avoid bats. Now, this has been looked at for quite a while, And so we're going to look at the physical nervous system mechanisms, and then we're going to also look at what the some of the theories behind what's going on here. And so what they've noticed with early on is the moth avoidance behavior has two receptors, A1 and A2. So we have two different nerve receptors that are attached to the tympanum membrane, which is really the eardrum of a moth. And then there are nerve endings that basically go to the muscles in the wing. So the A1 receptor is sensitive to ultrasounds that are low to moderate intensity. And the A2 receptor is sensitive to ultrasounds that are high intensity sounds. And then there's also a B cell, which is not shown here, which is not actually a neuron. It's a cell that does react, that is also involved in this, they believe. Okay, so the idea was that if you look at this, that this diagram, which is very difficult to look at, but the whole idea is what receptors were being fired when these types of sounds. So again, the low and medium frequencies being picked up by the A1 receptor, the higher intensity frequencies being picked up by A2. And it turns out the ultrasound vibrations that we're not even hearing, the moths are hearing, but we're not hearing. They're below our hearing ability. They are picked up better in short bursts than they are long term. So the idea was that, and this is the early theory behind it, that the A1 receptors were kind of picking up where the bat sonar was coming from. And they could detect that better than the bat can detect it. So they could detect it farther away. So if they would pick that up with the A1 receptor, they would then quickly try to move away so the bat doesn't ever detect them. As the bat got closer, the A2 receptor was thought to have fired. And then what that would do is now the moth knows that the bat is within range, coming toward it, needs to try to quickly get away, and only has seconds to decide. And then that the A2 would cause this erratic behavior where the moth actually starts doing an erratic flight and or just drops out of the sky. So the bat, when it thinks it's going after something, that moth now is no longer there. So that's what Roeder came up with, and that's been taught, and actually we taught that years ago. Now, what you're finding out, though, is there are some nuances that we weren't picking up on. And so what's happening now is, how do moths locate bats in space? And, they have two ears, so they have two A1 receptors. And the idea is wherever that's hitting is the direction that the bat is going, is. So what they do is they turn, so both ears are hearing the same thing, which now knows that the bat is behind them, and then they take off. And then again, the A2 receptor was supposed to get them to drop out of the sky. Well, what's now happening is the A2 cell even necessary? And what somebody has come up with is with these normal pulses. Here you can see, here's the pulse, the ultrasonic cry of the hunting bat. And then there's this terminal buzz. Well, they're showing here some of the things that are happening. And we've got B cells and A1 cell. The B cell and the A1 cells are reacting to this. But it turns out the A2 receptors aren't really active. So when they're a distance away or when they're right up close, the A2s don't seem to fire during the escape response. So the question now is that A2 receptor really necessary? What they were really finding is at the end of that call, right when that bat is doing that buzz sound, where they're going to be the closest to them and in attack mode, that A2 receptor is not firing. So the question was, is it even necessary? And we look at these behaviors and we look at what's going on, and we just assume they evolved this way. Maybe the A2 receptor actually had a reason before and no longer is useful. Maybe it does have some fine tuning that we're not really keying into. So Even these simpler behaviors, which we thought we hadn't understood, there's still questions and still studies being done on why these occur. And again, the behavior as the, we talked about the different causations. The proximate cause is these receptors being fired. The ultimate cause is survival, is getting out of the bat's range, and then when the bat's really close, is just falling out of the sky or the erratic flight. But we don't necessarily know exactly what's causing it. We thought we had a good handle on it, and now further studies have shown we may not be right. And so we will stop the share, and we will stop the recording.